"Next applicant, please," my secretary said from the hallway. I barely looked up from my laptop. It was just another Friday, another round of interviews. Running a company like Nutrigold Foods came with hundreds of decisions each week, and lately, I had stopped caring about faces, until I heard the voice that froze my hands mid-air. "Good morning, I'm Daniel Roberts. I'm here for the Business Development Officer position." For a moment, I thought my ears were lying. That voice, deep, proud, slightly arrogant, still carried the tone of the boy who once stood in front of me and mocked me for selling groundnuts by the roadside. I raised my head slowly. There he was. Daniel. He was dressed neatly in a cheap suit that didn't quite fit. His face had aged a little. The sharp confidence that used to burn in his eyes was gone. He clutched his brown envelope nervously, and when our eyes met, I saw recognition flash through his expression like lightning. He froze. I didn't smile. For a long second, silence filled the room. He opened his mouth slightly, then shut it again, struggling to find words. "Sit down, Mr. Roberts," I said calmly. My voice was even, but inside me, memories came flooding back. Memories I had buried deep, memories of humiliation, hunger, and tears. He sat down, clearing his throat. "You look different," he muttered under his breath. "I should," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "It's been years." He forced a weak smile. "I guess, life happened." I wanted to laugh. Life happened? No. Life didn't just happen. Life tested me. It dragged me through pain, rejection, and ridicule, and I fought back with every broken piece of myself until I rose higher than he could ever imagine. "Tell me, Mr. Roberts," I said, flipping through his CV. "Why do you want to work here?" His hands trembled slightly. I lost my last job 6 months ago. The company downsized. I really need this opportunity. I looked at his resume again. A few good companies, but all short-lived. I noticed gaps, long months of unemployment. His eyes begged for mercy. Funny. Years ago, it was me begging him for kindness. I shut the file slowly and looked at him directly. "Do you remember me, Daniel?" He blinked, pretending not to. Sorry, I don't think." I smiled, the kind of smile that hides pain. "Maybe this will help you remember. You once told a girl that she was wasting her life selling groundnuts outside Wuse Market. You said she smelled like poverty." The color drained from his face. His lips parted, but no words came out. "You told her," I continued softly, "that no man would ever marry her, because who wants a groundnut seller?" His head dropped. Silence filled the office. I could feel my heart beating faster, but not out of anger, out of the deep ache of remembrance. "I'm sorry," he finally whispered. "I didn't know." I leaned forward slightly. "You didn't know what, Daniel? That the same girl you mocked would one day own the company you're begging to work for?" Tears filled his eyes. "Amelia," he whispered. You're Amelia Johnson." I nodded. He covered his face with his hands. For a man once full of pride, that sight was almost painful to watch. But I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat there quietly, staring at the man who once represented everything I thought I could never overcome. "Daniel," I said finally, my voice calm, "before I decide whether to hire you or not, let me tell you a story. My story. Maybe then you'll understand why I built this company, and why I'll never forget the day you mocked me." He looked up, eyes red. "I'll listen," he said softly. I took a deep breath and leaned back in my chair. And just like that, my mind drifted back to where it all began. 5 years ago, on the hot streets of Wuse Market, where dreams were sold cheaper than hope. If anyone had told me back then that my life would change, I would have laughed. I was just a poor girl with a tray of roasted groundnuts, trying to survive in a city that didn't care who you were unless you had something to offer. My name is Amelia Johnson, and 5 years ago, my life was a cycle of struggle. Every morning, I woke up before dawn in a tiny room I shared with my mother in Nigerian. My father had died when I was 15, leaving us with nothing but his old debts and memories. My mother sold akara by the roadside, and I hawked groundnuts after school to help her. When rent became too hard to pay, I dropped out of school and focused on selling full-time. It broke my mother's heart, but survival doesn't wait for dreams. Every day, I carried my tray through the busy parts of town. Wuse Market, Jarby Park, sometimes Garki. I would smile at strangers, calling out softly, "Groundnut! Fresh groundnut! Just 50 naira." That was how I met Daniel. He was one of those young men who thought life owed them respect. He worked as an intern in a small office near the market. He always wore a tie, walked like he owned the world, and talked like everyone else was beneath him. The first time I saw him, I actually admired him. He looked educated, smart, confident, everything I wasn't. But admiration quickly turned into pain the day he decided to humiliate me. It was a hot afternoon. I was walking past his office when he and his friends came out laughing. "Hey, groundnut girl," one of them shouted. "How much for the whole tray?" I smiled politely. "Good afternoon, sir. The whole tray is..." Before I could finish, Daniel interrupted. "Wait, don't waste your English. You think any man will marry you like this? See how dusty you are." They all laughed. Something inside me cracked. But I smiled again, pretending it didn't hurt. "Sir, do you want to buy or not?" He smirked. "No, I don't buy from girls who smell like the street." Laughter again. I walked away quietly, holding back tears. But deep down, I promised myself one thing. I would never forget his face. That night, I cried silently. My mother asked what was wrong, and I lied that it was just tiredness. I couldn't tell her that a stranger's words had made me feel smaller than dirt. But that night also changed me. I decided I was done being pitied, done being mocked. I didn't know how, but I swore I would rise. After that day with Daniel, something changed inside me. Every time I walked through the market, I heard his voice in my head, "You smell like the street." It hurt, but it also fueled me. I didn't have money. I didn't have influence. But I had hunger, not the hunger that makes your stomach growl, but the one that burns inside your chest when you know you're meant for more. I began to study people. I watched how small shop owners talked to customers, how they arranged their products, how they convinced people to buy. I realized that business wasn't only about what you sold, it was about how you made people feel. So I changed my approach. Instead of just shouting "groundnut, 50 naira," I began to package them neatly in small transparent nylons. I tied them with colorful ribbons I bought from a local shop for just 200 Nigerian nairas. People noticed. They started calling me that clean groundnut girl. Soon, my customers included workers from nearby offices, drivers, and even bank staff who would send their assistants to buy from me every afternoon. I started saving small. 500 Nigerian nairas here, 1,000 Nigerian nairas there. But it wasn't easy. Some days, rain would fall, and I'd lose everything I had roasted that morning. Other days, I'd go home hungry because people didn't buy enough. My mother kept encouraging me, saying, "Amelia, don't let small shame destroy your big tomorrow." She believed in me more than I believed in myself. One evening, while I was counting my little savings, a woman approached my stand. She was middle-aged, wearing a simple gown and flat shoes. She bought a pack, tasted it, and smiled. "This is really good," she said. "Did you make it yourself?" "Yes, Ma," I replied shyly. She nodded. "You have potential. I run a small snack company that supplies nuts to supermarkets. Maybe I can show you a few things about proper packaging and branding." Her name was Mrs. Parker. That woman changed my life. She took me to her small workshop at Utako, where I learned how to roast nuts properly, remove burnt ones, and use labels. I would wake up early, help her, and learn everything she was doing. One day, she told me, "Amelia, don't work for me forever. Use what you're learning to start something of your own." Those words stuck with me. After a year, I saved enough to rent a small shop in Garki. I called it Nutrigold. The name came from the idea that groundnuts were not just snacks, They were healthy and golden in value. At first, business was slow. But I refused to give up. I created a small logo with a friend who knew graphic design. I printed nylon packs, made my snacks cleaner, fresher, and more attractive. Within months, people began to take notice. Shop owners started buying in bulk to resell. Then restaurants. Then a supermarket in Wuse. By the second year, Nutrigold became a small name people recognized. One day, as I was arranging my products at a minimart, I saw Daniel again. He looked the same, confident, proud, but still mocking. He was with a group of friends, dressed neatly. He saw me and smirked. "So, you're still selling groundnuts?" he said. I smiled faintly. "Yes, Daniel. But not by the roadside this time." He looked around and laughed. "A shop is still a shop. You'll soon get tired of this. People like you never go far." His words stung again, but I had learned something over the years, that people only mock what they fear or don't understand. So I didn't argue. I just said softly, "We'll see." That night, I worked twice as hard. I registered my business officially. I learned online marketing. I started supplying schools, offices, and local supermarkets. Within another year, I moved to a bigger space, hired 2 staff, and began to dream bigger. 3 years later, everything changed. Nutrigold was no longer a roadside idea. It was a full-fledged company. I had 10 workers, branded vehicles, and contracts with big supermarkets across Abuja. My first major break came when a local grocery chain, Freshmart, agreed to stock Nutrigold snacks nationwide. I cried that night. From 500 Nigerian Naira's savings to signing a supply deal worth millions, it felt unreal. My mother moved into a comfortable apartment. I paid off all her debts, opened a small food shop for her, and made sure she never lacked again. But while life was lifting me, Daniel's world was crumbling. I didn't know until one afternoon, during a business event in Maitama, when I overheard 2 men talking. "Have you heard about Daniel Roberts?" one said. "The guy who used to brag about working at Zenith Core? They fired him. Something about poor performance and arrogance." I paused. That name again. At that moment, I realized that arrogance might take a man up, but humility keeps him there. Years passed. Nutrigold became a household name. I opened branches in Lagos and Port Harcourt. We started exporting small packs abroad. I was named one of the top 40 under 40 female entrepreneurs in Nigeria. And then came the interview day. When I saw Daniel walk into my office that Friday morning, it felt like time stopped. For a moment, the air in the room grew heavy. It wasn't hatred I felt. It was something deeper. A mix of disbelief, sadness, and the strange ache that comes when you realize how life has rearranged the seats at the table. The same man who once mocked me for selling groundnuts was now standing before me, clutching a brown envelope, looking broken, desperate, and unsure of himself. He had changed. His once proud posture was gone. His shoulders slumped slightly. The expensive perfumes and flashy suits were replaced with a worn-out jacket and a cheap wristwatch that didn't match his shirt. He looked like a man who had fought too many silent battles and lost most of them. "Good morning, he said quietly, forcing a smile. I nodded slightly, pretending not to recognize him. "Please, have a seat." He sat carefully, his hands shaking just enough for me to notice. He looked around the office, the awards on the wall, the large Nutrigold logo behind me, the glass table, the calm air conditioning humming gently. I could tell he was intimidated. He cleared his throat. I applied for the business development officer role. I got an email inviting me for the interview. I folded my hands on the desk. "Yes, I see that here. Daniel Roberts, right?" "Yes, I looked at him long enough for him to start fidgeting. Then I asked softly, "Do you remember me?" He blinked, confused. I'm sorry. I don't think we've met before." I smiled faintly. "You sure? Maybe if I give you a hint. You once told a girl that no man would marry her because she smelled like the street. You told her selling groundnuts was for people without a future." His eyes widened instantly. For a moment, he froze completely. His lips parted but no words came out. He looked at me again, really looked this time, and recognition slowly filled his expression. "Amelia," he whispered. I nodded once. He swallowed hard, guilt written all over his face. "Oh my God. Amelia Johnson." I leaned back in my chair, watching him. "Yes, Daniel. The same Amelia you mocked in front of your friends at Wew's Market." He looked down, rubbing his palms together. I can't believe this. Amelia, I am so sorry." I stayed quiet, letting him drown in his own memory. I wasn't angry anymore. I had healed from that wound long ago. But standing in front of him now, successful and strong, made me realize something. Sometimes God doesn't give you revenge. He gives you results. He broke the silence again. I was stupid then. Arrogant. I thought I was better than everyone. I never imagined life could turn this way. "Life has a way of humbling all of us," I said calmly. He nodded, still avoiding my eyes. After that job I bragged about, things started going downhill. I lost my position, my relationship ended, and I had to start over. But no matter where I went, doors kept closing. Now, here I am. He looked around again, and his voice cracked slightly. "I didn't know this was your company. Nutrigold. You've built something incredible." "Thank you," I said quietly. He took a deep breath. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Amelia. But please, if there's any position at all, I just need a chance to work again. I'm willing to start from anywhere." I studied his face. Gone was the pride. Gone was the smirk that once made me feel small. All I saw now was a man who had learned his lesson the hard way. "You know, Daniel," I said slowly, "back then, your words broke me. I cried that day. But those same words became the reason I fought harder. Every insult you gave me turned into energy I used to build this company." He looked at me, ashamed. "I know I can't undo the past, but if you give me this opportunity, I promise I won't let you down." There was a long pause. Even my secretary, sitting outside, could feel the tension through the glass walls. I sighed and stood up, walking to the window. Abuja's skyline shimmered in the distance, the city that had seen me at my lowest and was now watching me stand tall. I turned around slowly. "Daniel, do you know why I built Nutrigold?" He shook his head. "I built it so that no girl will ever have to feel worthless because she sells groundnuts. I wanted to turn shame into pride. I wanted people to see value in small beginnings." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "And you did. You really did." I smiled gently. "Yes. And maybe this moment is another beginning. For you." He blinked. "You mean?" "Yes, Daniel. You'll start here. But not as a manager. You'll start as an intern. The same way I once started with nothing." His lips trembled. "Thank you. Thank you so much, Amelia." I nodded. "Don't thank me yet. Prove yourself. Learn humility, respect, and gratitude. That's your second chance." He stood slowly, tears in his eyes. "I promise I'll make it count." As he turned to leave, I called out softly, "Daniel." He stopped and looked back. I smiled faintly. Life always gives us back what we give others. It just takes time. He nodded, voice breaking. "You're right." And as he walked out of my office, I felt a strange peace settle in my chest. I had finally faced my past, not with anger, but with grace. It wasn't revenge that satisfied me. It was the quiet power of growth. Daniel walked out a changed man, and I sat back in my chair, whispering to myself, never despise small beginnings, because one day, those beginnings will stand tall before those who laughed. Weeks passed, and Daniel worked quietly. He was no longer proud. He arrived early, stayed late, and treated everyone with respect. One evening, as I was locking my office, he walked up to me and said, "You know, Amelia, life has a funny way of teaching humility." I nodded. "And sometimes, pain is the only teacher that works." He smiled sadly. I used to think success was about having everything. But looking at you now, I realize success is about becoming someone worth respecting. That night, I drove home quietly. I remembered the girl with the tray, the one who cried because a man called her poor. I wished I could tell her that everything would one day make sense. That pain was not the end, but the beginning of something beautiful. And as I parked in front of my house, I whispered to myself, never underestimate anyone. The same person you mock today might be the reason you eat tomorrow.